Hi folks, welcome back to Sci-Fi Scavenger. I'm going to do a review this evening on Inverted World by Christopher Priest. I say review, more my ramblings, my thoughts, my confused thoughts about this book. This is a serious piece of sci-fi. So let's do the basics and we'll get stuck in. So it's Inverted World by Christopher Priest. He of the Prestige fame, so he wrote that book that became that movie. It's not a huge book, 300, so not terribly thick, 303 pages. So something you can, although it does require some concentration, you can knock it out fairly quickly. First published in 1974, so it's getting on for 50 years old. It is not part of a series; it's an entirely standalone book. So the basic premise of the tale. By the way, I'm going to try and do this without spoilers. It'll be a little bit like working around an allergy. You know, sometimes if you're reading the ingredients on the back of a food product, it says may contain nuts. This might contain spoilers if I make a mistake, but I'm going to try to avoid it. What I will do at the very end, in the last couple of minutes, in a clearly telegraphed and signalled, suitably alarmed section, I will go full bore spoiler mode for a few minutes. But until then, you should be good if you haven't read this. Really, this isn't a book you want to be spoiled, because it's even a light spoiler would potentially ruin it for you. Okay, so what's the basic premise of the story? So the city of Earth must move, and it must keep moving, and it's not clear why, other than it must, at least to begin with. It's not clear where Earth is. There are sort of hints and folklore, if you like, that this city is moving around on a planet somewhere that is far away, and they've been sort of abandoned there. But it's not clear. It's never made clear exactly where the city is moving upon. But it certainly becomes quickly apparent that things are not normal. So it's not certainly not an Earth normal environment. So it's not surprising that they are of the opinion that there's somewhere else. Earth is not a big city. It's relatively small, and it's moved on rail tracks. So I'm not giving anything away there. It's literally on the cover of the book. Like, that's Rails City. That's the city of Earth right there, being pulled, winched along. The population of that city, which you never really clears how big it is, but it can't be very big. It's not huge. Is organised by guilds, and there's guilds have own certain specialisms that are required to keep the city moving. So it's like surveying ahead of the city, so they can get the route nailed down. And then there's winchers who winch, are bridge builders who, you guessed it, build bridges. And then there are the people that lay the rails, people that pick up the rails, and there's a guild for each of those things. And that's how the society is kind of organised around those guilds. And there's the kind of Freemasonry type aspect of kind of or Fight Club. You know, the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club, or the first rule of Guild is you don't talk about guilds. You're forbidden from discussing anything about to do with the guilds with anyone outside the guild, on pain of death. So it's pretty serious business. So the guilds who keep the sort of law around the sort of whys and wherefores of the city, kind of keep it moving along. So they do that by, I think I said, removing track from behind the city and then laying it in front of the city. So it's kind of a continuous process like that, sort of leapfrogging itself. It moves pretty slowly, roughly 1/10 of a mile a day. So it's all day, every day. There are people out there laying tracks so that the city can be winched along. It's apparent from the opening sentence of chapter 1, the opening words of which are, "I had reached the age of 650 miles," that things are fundamentally a bit different in this society. Our protagonist is a chap called Helwood Mann, who's a young man just kind of finishing school at the at the beginning of the novel, and he is being apprenticed to one of the guilds. And so the novel basically starts with him having his apprenticeship interview and deciding going through the process of being educated into the guilds. It's quite clever the way he does that, in that and this is again early doors in the book, so it's not going to spoil anything, but he gets to rotate around amongst all the guilds, so he gets a good so he and we, and this is a recurring theme, get a good education on what the process is and the whys and wherefores of it, or we think we do. So we learn through his experiences, and as the novel goes on, as he learns more strangeness is revealed, both in terms of the guild system, the oddities of the population of the city, and of the landscape through which it moves. So there's a lot of weird shit going on that you don't really understand at the beginning, and neither does Hellwood. Favourite character? It's really no contest. It has to be Hellwood Man. We almost are Hellwood Man. We're on his shoulder for most of the novel, learning as he learns through the process. So we're kind of growing in experience as he does. So it's hard not to identify with him, I think. So we're really all on his journey. There are some other likable characters. So a couple of female characters, Victoria, who he briefly has a relationship with, and then a lady called Elizabeth, who's not from the city. So there are people in the surrounding countryside, which in itself is odd, but more on that later. Favourite spaceship? My standard question for one of these things. For the purposes of avoiding spoilers, I'm going to plead the fifth here and say that I can neither confirm nor deny the presence of spaceships at this time. Filth level, so smut level in the book, not really. It's referred to in passing. There's some sort of sleeping about with the local women from outside of the city when Hellwood is charged with taking some back, having served their time as sort of surrogate mothers for the local population, who seem to have fertility issues, perhaps as a result of the fact that the entire population is crammed into something that could be moved on rails. So yes, it's low on the hanky-panky scale. High concept, highfalutin sci-fi concepts. Fuck yeah. The whole book is a highfalutin sci-fi concept, I think, although that's not obvious until the end. So I'll try not to reveal any plot points here. Suffice to say that there are time dilation effects that operate at different directions in different ways, depending on the circumstances, at even quite short distances from the city, although more and more of that is revealed as Hellwood's arc develops. But it's not made clear why that happens until the very end, either to Hellwood or to us. Those time dilation sort of effects affect the guildsman and our protagonist as he goes about his duties in the past, which is behind the city, and in the future, which is ahead of the city. There are different effects for reasons which aren't clear until the end. Much is spoken of something called the optimum, which is seemingly the sort of optimum position that the city should be in relative to what is not obvious. But that optimum is constantly moving, or is it? And the sun, which is not seen by the population because the city is enclosed. In fact, as a brief aside, again, very close to the beginning of the book, part of the initiation of the apprentices is to be taken to a viewing platform, which is guarded and locked and secret. The rest of the population don't know it's there, to observe a sunrise, which is a sort of mind-blowing experience for them because they've never seen it. It's mind-blowing because, contrary to what they've been taught growing up, the sun is not spherical. Or is it? Famously, there's a massive twist at the end of the book, which I was too thick to spot until it happened, kind of till I was hit in the face with it. That was a little bit mind blowing. So yeah, it's full of high concepts. What did it remind me of? This is probably not in keeping with the seriousness of the novel, but it mainly reminded me of The Wrong Trousers, when the Wallace and Gromit movie, when Gromit is trying to escape from the penguin baddie by furiously laying track for his moving toy train, which he's sitting on to zoom along, because he runs out of a laid track. Which had the advantage of at least it was clear why Gromit's train needed to keep moving, unlike the city in the book. But in science fiction terms, it reminded me of Alistair Reynolds' Absolution Gap. If only for the movie, if you recall that novel, if you've read it, there are some slowly moving cathedrals which are sort of circumnavigating a planet. And actually, I forget why that was as well. It's been a while since I read it. But that might have been influenced by this book. And the other thing that it reminded me of is Cities in Flight by James Blish, mainly because it's got moving cities. But mainly The Wrong Trousers. Mind fuckery, the degree to which the book is trying to fuck with your head. The whole book is a mind fuck, but it's so beautifully written that you don't mind. We're talking sort of questioning the nature of reality itself. The laws of physics are constantly being undermined, and neither Helmer nor we know why, or how, or even what, although there are clues along the way. Favourite scene? So not a scene as such, because spoilers, but a thread perhaps. So I quite like the tension between the status quo in the city and innovation and different ways of thinking, and challenging that status quo, which builds and builds over the course of the book. Tradition is valued in the city. It's kept them alive for what appears to be the last couple of 100 years, since their apparent abandonment. The strictures that the dwindling population exist under are rarely questioned. And Hellwood himself is far from being a change agent. In fact, he resists change as a sort of fully paid up member of the guild until he's forced to confront reality at the very end of the novel. Although his wife, or is she, becomes a leading light in the Terminators, the agitators of the peace, who are sort of a bit sort of suffragette type group that come to the fore towards the end of the book. Did I enjoy it overall? I did. This was my first Priest book, but I don't think it'll be my last. His writing style is beautifully clear. I mean, this is not an easy book conceptually to deal with, but the writing is not challenging you like some authors do. His prose is good. It's not sparse to the degree that I'm qualified to judge, but neither is it kind of dense or verbose. Sometimes you feel like there are authors that would never use 10 words when 100 would do. So a lot is communicated in not very many words. The perspective changes throughout the book. So some of the sections are from Hellwood's perspective, some are from others, and all revealing more and more about what's going on. It's not an entirely linear sort of plot. We get to figure stuff out along the way, piece it together. I didn't mind that. Somewhat satisfying. In fact, I didn't find that annoying. So it was a sort of a riddle wrapped in a puzzle, wrapped in an enigma. So will I read it again? Yes, I think. I feel obliged to read it again, because it's kind of like watching a movie where there's unforeseen twists that have little clues along the way, but that you miss because you weren't paying attention. So I have to go back and watch the movie, or in this case, read the book again to see how stupid I was the first time around. And so I think, in hindsight, there are questions that one might have asked along the way that would have poked holes in the received sort of position that the guilds have, and would have forced me as a reader to kind of question what I was being told. But definitely I enjoyed it. Would I recommend it? Definitely go ahead, roll up, get your head messed with. for the princely sum of £8.99 if you buy it new. My overall score out of 10 is an 8. I think it's thought-provoking stuff, and it's still kind of lingering with me a book or two later. So I'm going to let that stew for a year or two and come back to it, I think. So that's the end of the more or less spoiler-free portion of the book, and then I'm going to have at it with spoilers in the final section. So for those of you that are doing a runner now wanting to avoid those, then thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book and what you thought about it. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one, which I think will be another review. I haven't decided of what yet, but something that I've read recently. So for those of you that are sticking around, we're going to go to spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Ding, ding, ding. Spoilers. So, fuck me, the City of Earth is, wait for it, on Earth. Which explains why the locals that weren't in the city, the sort of people out in the sticks that they had to find to trade with and to borrow their women folk for a few months, why they mysteriously spoke Spanish or Portuguese. So it turns out we're 200 or 300 years down the road from a sort of civilization collapse, which seems to have been brought about in part by the discovery of a sort of high energy physics phenomenon which promised free energy to the world, kind of causing the economy to fall apart. So the crazy scientist character we don't really know much about, but who is referred to throughout the book as sort of the founding savior of the City of Earth, who's kept them alive and showed them the way, and it was the sort of author of the law that the guilds follow sort of scrupulously. But anyway, that crazy scientist made a further discovery that it was possible to tap into that phenomenon, the nature of which I didn't really fully understand, by following a sort of ley line on the surface of the Earth, which he discovered apparently in China. I think it was, or Mongolia, something like that. So my guess would be that research station in China that first tried to tap into that was caught up in some sort of local collapse of the laws of physics, which meant that their local reality was very different to most of the rest of the planet, causing distortions in dimensions, hyperbolic geometry, if you will, and really fuck knows what else. But that was a couple of 100 years back, and since then they've been sort of moving that city, and again it's still not clear to me why they had to keep moving it, but they did. But my guess would be that research building, that research station's buildings were somehow put on a platform with some wheels on, so that it could be winched across the tracks. So I would guess that rather than being a city, it's effectively like a power station, which, if you look at the picture, I mean, this is an artist's impression, so who knows, it does look kind of like a power station. Where are we? Yeah, so and they've been moving across Eurasia since. That's Eurasia, not Erasure, the 80s kind of synth band, Eurasia. And this is to avoid getting too far behind the optimum, with sort of world-ending results if they failed. So some of the sort of peril in the book is around sort of how far behind the optimum the city's getting and what they can do to get ahead, because bad things await if they get too far behind. And we get some sense of kind of what those bad things might be when Hellwood takes his surrogate mums back to their village, because those women, as he got further and further, sort of 30 odd miles away from the city, they were the sort of boundaries of those physical effects were sort of stretching them out, or they appeared to be from Hellwood's perspective or frame of reference. Anyway, so very strange effects. So I think it was funny. He met one of his fellow guildsmen on the way back from doing something similar, and they had a sort of locker room conversation about whether or not Hellwood had shagged any of the women yet? And the answer was no. And the other one sort of winked at him and said, well, you better get on with it, because while you've still got the chance. And that's not really clear why that was. Was he talking about because you can have them back in the city? Or it wasn't at the time. It became clear as they started to kind of shrink and squish down and get flattened out, like they were living on a neutron star or something. So at the big twist at the end is a few things kind of come to a head. One is the city reaches a river that is too wide for it to cross, and they're sort of one of the characters, the stronger female characters, Elizabeth, is not from the city, but she mysteriously speaks English. It turns out she's come from England, and she's like a scientific missionary to the. England seems to have recovered somewhat of its sort of governance and society and science, whereas the rest of Europe is still on its back. So she's got a sort of medical centre in one of the local villages, and she's trying to explain to Hellwood that mate, that's the sea. You're not going to build a bridge to cross that. That's the fucking Atlantic. And he won't have it. It's like, oh, we've not been able to build a bridge before. The bridge builders will do it. It's what they do, and they try to build bridges, and surprise, surprise, they sort of fail. A storm takes them down, or the pilings sink into the sand, or whatever. It's not happening. They're not going to be able to build a bridge that can take a small city across thousands of miles of land. So he has a bit of a meltdown. He goes all Reggie Perrin for a minute, swimming out into the sea, having lost all hope, and then turning. And the very final sort of words of the book, really turning around and swimming back onto the beach. My overwhelming sort of thought is, what on earth? Like, how did Christopher Priest come up with that as the premise for a book? Where did I can't imagine anyone thinking, I know, let's get down with some hyperbolic geometry and see how I can fold that into a plot for a science fiction novel, and then working out. Maybe he worked back from that and thought, well, how can I work it into a novel? And that's how we ended up where we are. I don't know, but very interesting. So the reason there were no spaceships is because they weren't in space; they were on Earth. You could get anywhere you needed to on horseback. So the big twist was discovering at the end that they weren't in fact abandoned a couple of hundred years ago on some kind of colonization mission. They were in fact there all the time, just in a slightly different reality caused by some sort of local warping effect of this attempt to get free power. Anyway, it properly messes with my head. As I said before, I really enjoyed it, and I'll certainly be looking out for more books by Christopher Priest. I think his writing was excellent. Again, I've said this I don't know how many times, I'm amazed by the number of science fiction authors that I'd never heard of. I mean, I've heard of The Prestige, I just didn't really twig that it was by Christopher Priest. Yet another author that I need to dig into more of their work. So I think that's everything for this one. Spoilers are now over. I think I'm going to do either Eversion by Alistair Reynolds, which I haven't quite finished yet, or Terra Ignota, if I can summon up the courage to do that. I read that a couple of months ago, and I have some thoughts on, not all of them good, about that. So I'm definitely going to do a review on that, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do it next. So for now, I'm off. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. Smash the like button if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already done that. And I will see you next time. Bye bye.